Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cougar Dash. I'm your host, Ryan Root, followed by, of course, Cody Schoeler. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some Cougar athletic stuff today. Had some news come out last week. We had a bit of a 1 week vacation from Cougar Dash, but the men's basketball schedule was released for the Pac-12. And WSU, it's kind of an interesting situation for them. Obviously, they get home and away games with the majority of the Pac-12 teams, but there are some that only have a home and away game. Ones that stick out on here, I can see. I believe UCLA is a away-only game, which is kind of a tough break for WSU, I'll say. It's probably one of the hardest arenas to play in the Pac-12. And the home-only, WSU will be playing Arizona. Also, kind of a favorable matchup at home, facing against an Arizona team. However, still a tough team to beat. And then, of course, another away game would be ASU, another home game for USC. So these are tough teams to go against with an either only home or only away matchup. Cody, what are your thoughts on that schedule outcome?
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice break getting UCLA and Arizona just once, two of the better teams, especially UCLA, who, I mean, showed their potential in the tournament and should be really good again. But my other kind of initial reaction is they're kind of getting screwed with the early home and early away. The Pac-12 likes to put a few conference games now kind of in like December, I think it is. And WSU gets USC and ASU for those, were the other two games you mentioned. So those are also really tough matchups to play a team, those two teams who will also probably be in the top of the conference early in the season. Last year, they got Oregon State early, who was struggling at the time, and they were going to play Colorado, but that got canceled due to COVID. So it'd be nice to get, a team that probably won't have it all figured out at the time, because I think maybe ASU could fall into that category, losing a lot of talent. But
they lost Remy. That's going to really be bad for him.
But I mean, at the end of the day, when you're looking at a basketball schedule, I mean, they're going to play every team once. They play every team but two twice. So until we know maybe exactly when these are, don't know what to make of it. But those early games are kind of the biggest takeaway from that, is that they're going to have some really tough matchups early in the season, but that also could be, that could be nice to challenge this team early. And if they've got their stuff figured out, maybe we'll know a bit earlier, because we saw them go on this incredible 8-0 run last year, but it was against,
one
Idaho.
Conference opponent.
Yeah. And it was Oregon State, who was at the time, one of the worst teams in the conference, but it was kind of beating up on these teams that they were supposed to beat up. Well, and they didn't even beat up on them, especially at the start. They were playing them close. So they're going to get tested early on, and that could be good. That could be bad. We don't know. But, I mean, we do know that we're going to see some good competition early in the season that will really let us know what this team, has in store for us.
Well, I'll say one thing about the schedule turnout here. They're going to get another pair of cracks at Stanford to see if they can get I believe the road game this year was a loss. Have not had very much luck on the road against Stanford. So they'll have two cracks at them. They will play USC and Arizona twice, apart from those early home and away games. Then they'll play, Oregon twice, Cal, Colorado, UW, etc. I do agree with you saying that they kind of made it out all right, only playing Arizona, UCLA once, considering UCLA, I mean, they just made it to the Final Four. So, of course, they're going to be very hungry going into this next year. The Pac-12 is now a nationally recognized conference for men's basketball, I'd say. It was already well recognized for women's basketball, but judging off of the NCAA tournament this year, I mean, UCLA, Oregon State, Oregon, I mean, even Arizona, I think, can be thrown in there. USC, of course, yep. They're going to get the top recruits. They're going to be right back. They're going to be right back at the forefront next season. The WSU has Mohamed Gay coming in, first or one of the highest, if not the highest recruit in WSU history.
I think he is the highest.
Yeah. How much of a difference is that going to be early on against a USC and an Arizona State team that are, they're going to be filled with veterans on that team? I mean, how is still kind of a young and up and coming WSU team going to fare against them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly going to be, the thing. And I mean, this schedule it's the same teams, but it's harder than it was last year. Just by the fact that I think a lot of teams are better, and the Arizona, like you mentioned, they had a self-imposed postseason ban. I don't think they were going to make it anyway, but Arizona could be on the level. Stanford was a really borderline team for a lot of. They were in and out, kind of on the bubble. ASU certainly had more talent than they played up to, and then what does that leave? Obviously, Colorado's good, Oregon's good, but that leaves Cal, who Cal struggles.
Right. And no more Matt Bradley either. So
yeah, I don't expect much from Cal. Utah they are getting a new coach or have a new coach. They might not be ready to compete now. In UW, which who knows what's going on there, but it's great to see that they're kind of struggling. So, I mean, WSU could be the fourth worst team just by default of the fact that there might be a lot of good teams. So, I mean, I think that's all in all, that's good for WSU. I'd rather them, be in a competitive conference than, be in some conference that gets two teams in. And so, it doesn't really matter. So I'm glad that they will be tested. And I think, in the long run, that's only good for them, because just the legitimacy of the conference, and to point to big wins, and to point to, look, we finished, this in the Pac-12, like that actually means something. So it's good. I'm not the type of person that is going to root for all these conference opponents in non-conference games, whether it's like a lot of people like to do it in football, especially, to be like, we need them to be good when we play them to win. I don't really care about that. Like, I want these other teams to maybe I like them, maybe I don't. I don't really care what they're doing. Otherwise, I don't want, Oregon to be undefeated when we play them so we can knock them off the top 5 ranking. But I do think it is good for the teams to be good. Of course, I'd like all the 11 other teams to just suck and WSU can, destroy them. But that's not going to happen. So if that's not going to happen, then I'll take some competitiveness and just to watch some good basketball games. That's what I'm excited for.
Well, there's not really many bottom feeders in the conference anymore. Kind of like you said. I mean, UW, as much as they've struggled recently, even they still have great players on the team. And, before we know it, they're going to make a change to really their basketball operations and start being one of those top teams as well. And Cal's really the only other.
They suck.
We are the, or I guess we split the Apple Cup series this year, but we owned the Apples last year, though.
Yes.
But other than Cal, there's not really many teams that can be in the bottom of that category. I mean, Oregon State. Everyone was thinking Oregon State was going to be 11th, 10th in the conference, or
Well, they were. No, they didn't finish.
In the preseason polls, I think they were ranked like 10th or 9th.
They were last.
Yeah, they were last. Yeah. So.
And they were struggling for a while, and they turned it on at the end.
Right, and they made it to the Sweet 16, I want to say, or is the Elite 8?
One of the two. No, they made it to the. Oh no, they made it to the Elite 8.
Yeah,
I believe.
So this conference is recognized as very competitive now, and it's kind of a tough break for WSU, knowing that every year in the Kyle Smith era so far, they've made vast improvements. And even with recruiting being great this offseason, having some great JUCO transfers coming in, and Noah Williams kind of stepping up to be that next big guy, it's looking bright as of right now. But those early matchups are going to kind of tell what's going on for the rest of the season. And knowing that we're probably going to have a regular season, like an actual normal season, if you will, there we'll probably have opportunities for tournaments and whatnot with out-of-conference teams. And I assume WSU is going to want to put their name into a somewhat recognizable tournament, not playing, the New Mexico states, not playing the Northwestern states or anything like that. Playing, Ohio State, playing maybe if they could play another Big Ten team, or if they could play an SEC team or something like that. I mean, I'm sure WSU wants to put their name into recognition because I think more people are starting to realize this team is kind of a dark horse for the NCAA tournament this next season. But we can kind of move on to some recent news as of late that just came out today for freshman center Deshaun Jackson, who has been invited to train with the 2021 U.S. Basketball U19 team. This is great for Deshaun, I'll say, considering just how talented he is as a true freshman. Obviously, he had a little bit of a slow start getting into the rotation at the very, very beginning of the season. I believe he was battling an injury of sorts. And I think his first points as a WSU Cougar was at the free throw line and hadn't made a field goal for a little bit. And then all of a sudden, now he's alongside with FA as one of the premier big men on this team. So he's invited to train with the U.S. U19 team, along with 2 Gonzaga players. I mean, this is great for just for the local area to have someone from WSU train with this team. I mean, what are sort of your thoughts about Deshaun Jackson being able to have this opportunity?
Yeah, so I don't know exactly how this is going to work. I know it's the 2021 U19 like World Cup, I think. Yeah, the World Cup team. This is a training camp roster. There's 28 players on it, so I don't know how many make the final cut. And so my original thought was, well, if he's on this with Chet Holmgren, who's one of the Gonzaga players, who was, I don't know if he was the number one recruit, but he was certainly a top 5, top 10 recruit in the nation. I said, if he's on there with,
say Jalen Suggs was number 1 in the country, I want to say, going into this next year. Yeah, or going into the previous year, I meant. Yeah. Yeah.
But if Chet Holmgren's on there, I don't know what kind of shot Deshaun Jackson has, because Deshaun Jackson's great, but he's not a top 10, player. But I then went through and kind of looked at the roster. There's only 2 players listed at center, Deshaun being one of them, but there's 4 other players, including Holmgren, who are 6'10" or taller, with Holmgren being 7'1", listed as a forward. So, 20 out of 28 players, only 6 can really fill that big man spot. So I don't know how many they're going to keep. I assume Holmgren is almost a lock to be on that team. He's very talented. But once I looked at that, I thought that maybe Deshaun Jackson does have a legitimate chance to, make this team and play in that World Cup. Regardless of whether that happens, just the fact that he's named to that team is incredible. Just the fact that he will get to, however long the training camp is, be around some of the best young basketball players, in the country is just awesome. And so he certainly will get he will certainly improve just from that. And if he gets to play, if he makes the team, that, that will even just, elevate him even more. But I think this kind of also goes along with what we saw toward the end of the year. FA came out the gates incredible, lighting it up, but we kind of saw him struggle. But Deshaun got consistently better throughout the year, and this just caps it off. I thought towards the end of the year he was the 3rd best player, and he, they were going to him in the post. He was becoming a very important part of the offense, and so I just think this is huge for him. And there's only so much recognition you can get when you're not. There's only so many Pac-12 spots on all these, first team, second team, freshman team, whatever. But this is just one more thing to kind of validate to him, that it's working and that he's incredibly talented and it's going well for him. So I'm excited. There's so many players that could have made this, and the fact that he's one of the 28 is huge for him and for WSU. The fact that we can point to the fact that we have one of these guys, whether it's to justify them as a team this year or to point to recruits and say, hey, look, people actually do pay attention to WSU. I know it's in Pullman, in the corner of the country, and some 30,000 people town, but people do pay attention. There is not this incredible national spotlight, but you can get recognized here. You can get drafted. You can make these types of teams. So, I think just all around this is an awesome opportunity.
Deshaun Jackson, I think, is going to shock quite a few people, I think, training with the U.S. team, considering that he's defied expectations this entire year. I don't think anybody was really thinking that he was going to be the premier, center that he was for WSU and kind of that third scoring option for a while. I mean, people were thinking, I know I was thinking Andre Yakumovsky was going to probably be that third scoring option, if not FA, considering his hot start. But Deshaun stepped up with his post play a lot. And I point at two games that he had against Evan Mobley, who is going to be a top 3 selection in the draft this summer. I mean, he matched up with him perfectly fine. And by some regards, he outplayed him in the first game.
We certainly scored on him.
Yeah.
I don't know what maybe
Evan Mobley, that wingspan is about as I swear his wingspan I think is taller than his height alone. So
probably the dude's got incredible arms. So maybe Deshaun Jackson couldn't lock down Evan Mobley, but who can? But the fact that he could score on a guy that good, I mean, certainly that was. I mean, I wonder if that was a game that the USA basketball people were watching and saw, because they certainly were probably watching Evan Mobley.
I think it shows a lot about just Deshaun's character going forward. I know I did a feature on Deshaun Jackson earlier this season about just kind of his work ethic and things like that. And he matched up against Evan Mobley quite a few times growing up in Vallejo, California. And it just shows he knows how to train himself and get better every single day. He's always one of those gym rat kind of guys that really a lot of people on this WSU roster have that trait. I mean, I'm even looking at players like TJ Bamba is even up there, and he doesn't get talked about a whole lot. Isaac Bonton's kind of the forefront of those gym rat type of players, but Deshaun Jackson went right into camp and was like, here we go, I'm going to be a workhorse as well. And I remember talking to Brandon Chatfield about Deshaun Jackson a while ago and being like, what's a moment that stood out to you about Deshaun? And he said there was a moment where they were doing a drill. I think it was like a kind of a 3-on-3 fast break drill or something. And Chatfield had done like a putback dunk or something off of a miss from another player. And Deshaun Jackson went right up to him and said, oh, hey, what was kind of your thought process doing that? Your kind of your footwork and your positioning and this or that. And I mean, Chatfield, he's only a year older than Deshaun. We're not talking to Jeff Pollard or anything like that. I mean, he really wanted to learn from anyone and everyone from this team, including the coaching staff. I mean, everyone raves about Deshaun. I think this is obviously a great opportunity for him going forward. And considering this next season has such high hopes across all, the WSU fan base, now that he's going to line up against Muhammad Gay or F.A. Abagidi, it's going to be a very tall team this next year. This is also sort of a proving ground for him, I would say. You can sort of give me your thoughts on this. I mean, this is also, I would imagine that the WSU coaching staff is watching this as well to see, okay, is he going to stay in that starting spot? Or are we going to start the greatest recruit in program history? Are we going to start FA? What's the mixture going to be? Because there's still Andre to kind of float around at that 3 spot as well. So how is that all going to shape up, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I know I kind of talked about it last year, but I do think it just comes down to how they want to play, because I don't like the mix with Deshaun and FA as they are currently, with FA not really being able to shoot at a great rate. I don't like kind of crowding it with 2 bigs. I think they both work best as a 5, with Deshaun being kind of a post-centric guy and FA being an athletic rim runner. So I think that it's going to come down to how they want to play. Because if Gay can come in and be a 4 that maybe stretches it a bit more, I think he could be a more natural fit with one of them. And regardless of who starts and all this, I think that's going to change. And I think the minutes are going to be there for those guys, whether they start or not. And it could be matchup based. We've seen them go bigger or smaller depending on what they went up against other teams. I know UCLA plays incredibly small, but I think that Deshaun probably ends up starting, especially if they still want to play him in that post and run kind of the offense like that. I think this kind of further proves that, and the fact that he was one of the better players down the stretch. But if they want to go more athletic and space it out more, then maybe he is the big man off the bench. But I still think whether he starts or not, he's going to be playing a significant role on the team, especially considering it's a young team that is really going to need to grow.
Considering all of this talent that is on the WSU roster now, I mean, when's the last time that the roster has been like this jam-packed with just talent across the board? It just, it gets me really excited. But there's a whole other side of the game that I think is honestly going to play a huge part into next season. I think a lot of people can agree with it, but next season we're going to have fans. I mean, we're kind of reaching the final couple months here of this pandemic, and now we're going to have, most likely, I mean, we're going to have fans at these games, at these basketball games, even at the football games. Fans impact the game a ton, and this kind of came up to me in terms of watching the NBA playoffs just yesterday. I mean, I'm watching Madison Square Garden lose their mind over the Knicks
at Trae Young.
Yeah, I mean, they're losing their mind at Trae Young, but even when their team loses 4-1 in the series, it's still like the fans are just happy to be there, happy to experience the team. So going into this next year, it's not even that fans are coming into Beasley to finally cheer on WSU. Well, fans are going to be cheering on somewhat of a legitimate team now. This isn't, the last time that fans were attending games regularly was not this past season, but the season beforehand, Kyle Smith's first year, where fans were still at least a tad bit skeptical going in. And then as the season kind of went on, there were several, ups and downs where there was, losing streaks, or there was a win over number 8 Oregon. I mean, fans didn't really have a huge idea of what was going on. The one game that fans attended, like by far 100% capacity, was of course the Klay Thompson game where they beat Oregon State. And I mean, if you were at were you at that game? I would like to say you were. Of course. I was, 10 feet away from Klay Thompson at a press conference, which was pretty nuts. But that whole atmosphere in there, it was jam-packed. It was loud as can be. Isaac Bonton makes a half-court shot right before halftime. I mean, that whole atmosphere was ridiculous. It was almost like I was in, the Duke Arena watching the Blue Devils play a normal season game. And having fans attend the game now, I think is huge. I mean, what do you think, just overall, what's your general idea of how fans are going to impact WSU's next season?
Yeah, I mean, like you said with the NBA, we're just seeing it already with just the energy of these arenas. And, NBA, it works in a bubble. Obviously, nothing is as good, but college basketball absolutely thrives off just the energy and the atmosphere in these arenas, these small arenas packed with fans. And, for a team like WSU, a kind of more of an underdog team, I think the fans are even more important, especially at home. When you're playing a UCLA and it's a close game, sometimes, the fans can be a big, kind of deciding factor in how this game goes, the momentum swings and the noise that they can create. And, obviously every team feeds off the energy of the crowd. That is for sure. But I think WSU has a lot of players that do that. Obviously, Noah Williams, as just a freshman, was just feeding off the crowd. I think Bonton did some of that, and I mean, F.A. Abogidi is going to bring the house down with some of his dunks. And I couldn't help but watching the start of the year and just all throughout the year and being like, oh, if there was fans for this play that he made, the place would go crazy. And for WSU, I don't think there's really any downside. I can't think of a downside for anybody. I don't know if any team plays better with fans. But I mean, just, the fact that, fans will get to support them in person and finally get to, I'm sure that they know that they're on the rise and they're up and coming and, they're building some legitimacy, but they haven't got to see it yet. They've had family members in the stands, and I'm sure even that little bit helped. But when they actually see, the fans come out, and I think, I went to my freshman, sophomore year, our first years here, I'd go to the basketball games to, sit in the stands and watch. And then, now people are going to be in the student section. There's going to be more people there. It's not going to be jam-packed every game, but, when they play UW, people will be there. When they play, UCLA on a Friday night or, whenever it is, for these big games, people are going to be there. And we've seen how that can impact the game. I mean, CJ Ellaby, hits a game-winning shot against Arizona State, and the fact that the fans are there, I think, is a huge part in that. So, I mean, it's just going to be obviously better for them for the season, but I think it's just going to help, them as a program. And there's a lot of players that haven't played in front of fans yet. A lot of young players that have yet to play in front of these Cougar fans, and I think it's going to be nice for the fans to finally get out there and show these guys some love because they did it for a whole year with out people getting to be there.
I mean, fans being in attendance kind of goes both ways for WSU. You're going to have a ton of people supporting you at home, and you're going to have a ton of people resenting you in away games. Yeah. I mean, UW
sometimes
away
that helps.
This year. Sure,
sometimes that helps.
UW on the road this year with fans now is going to be a different game than it was last year without fans. However, the year before where there were fans, Noah Williams and CJ Elby, kind of like what you're saying, Seattle natives,
yeah, exactly.
They fed off the crowd immensely and had great games. So aside from the UW rivalry, I mean, playing on the road in Utah with fans there is going to be different than playing on the road without fans. I mean, it goes both ways.
Imagine that Noah Williams Stanford game. I can't remember if that was at home or if it was away.
There were a few fans in the stands. That was the first game that there were.
Was that at home?
Yeah, that was at home.
I mean, imagine. Even if it wouldn't have been packed, but just imagine the fans that were there. Like, I think that, because we saw him get tired at the end of the game. I think he gets a little more, energy rush when the crowd starts cheering when he catches the ball, at the 3-point line instead of, because he got really tired. So especially a guy like him, I don't think he struggles against UW as much when he's, has the crowd to kind of play off of. No,
and UW went down right to the wire the second time they played him off of, I believe it was a Noah Williams layup or something something went down to the wire. I think Noah Williams dribbled up the entire court, or was it Bonton? One of the two. I can't quite remember. But Noah Williams' game against Stanford, the 40-point, onslaught that he had against Stanford. I mean, that and Andre Yakumovsky was 2 assists away from a triple double or 1 assist away or something like that. I mean, that game, that was the first game that a few fans were being allowed into Beasley. We're talking 100 to 200 people, not that very many people there. And Noah Williams did say, he's like, yeah, the fans there. I mean, that was a great atmosphere to have. And that was just 100 to 200 people. I mean, Beasley can fit 10, 20 times that. So
it won't, but it can.
Yeah. I mean, it's having that Stanford game with a full house. If you had that Stanford game with a clay game crowd,
oh yeah,
it would have been insane.
Even just a normal crowd, even 2,000 students there,
even an average WSU crowd, it would have been crazy.
Even that would just be crazy. A student section that gets on its feet. I just think football. Every sport needs fans. Football, a lot of the players kind of said, yeah, we notice it, but at the end of the day, you get on that field, you're just doing your thing, and there's enough
other than
players
false starts, there's not much.
Yeah, and there's enough players and stuff to hype it up, but you can kind of hype it up yourself. It's football, but basketball, I think there is a genuine just disconnect when there are no fans there because, all you're hearing is the ball bouncing and shoes squeaking and, the shot goes in and you got 10 bench players cheering. But to hear a roar of a crowd, either way, even, I think it helps when they're booing you too. These guys are, that's what they want to do. They want to silence a crowd. If they're away, they want to make them cheer when they're home. So I think having them there is going to, kind of just boost this team even more.
Especially going into next season, now that WSU's football team is not what it was 2-3 years ago. So now, the fan interest for football is kind of dipping a little bit, and basketball is only going up, even with women's basketball going up as well. Volleyball, you can throw in there, baseball. All of these secondary sports are going up, and some of the football crowd might go over to basketball and baseball and whatnot and say, this might be something I want to cheer for.
Yeah, but even, women's basketball, getting to go out and support that team that made the tournament. Just all these sports, it's going to be huge to have the fans back.
Now is a great time for WSU to have their best years of all these sports. Now that there's a year removed of fans not being there, and now fans are eager to go to a sports game. And then on top of that, I want to see what WSU basketball is all about. I think it's going to be really exciting. But that is all the time we have for today. It is 1:30. Our 30-minute show is now over. But you can, of course, catch us at the same time next week at 1 o'clock Pacific Standard Time on Thursdays. And you can also catch our show. Cody and I host NFL Dash. And you can see those releases as well in the middle of the week.
Our last episode, not our last, our final, but our most recent episode just went up So if you see this, go check that out.
We were talking about the Julio Jones madness and everything. It's a ton of fun to kind of talk about, and we love talking about all things NFL and of course all things WSU. You can find us at the same time next week, of course, 1:00 on Thursdays. As always, go Cougs.